And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Greetings of peace, mercy, and blessings to you all. We're here on Just Us, building restorative community. Today I have a former colleague, a friend, a brother, who I've just began to scratch the surface about. Ahmed, introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself.
Thank you, Chris. It's an honor to be here on your program. I know we've been playing around trying to get me to sit and have a conversation with you, but you're a busy man. And
we're both family men, right?
Exactly.
It's hard to schedule.
Absolutely. So I'm really honored to be here today.
Honor is mine.
Yeah. As I was saying before we began, it's really difficult for me sometimes when I'm asked to talk about myself. You may think that it's an easy task, but it's really the most difficult thing to do. Usually I ask people, what is it that you want to know? Which aspect? Because my life has so many chapters. And it's not because I'm the most experienced person, but just because of the different things phases that I've gone through, which I'm grateful to God for to be here. But I was saying, I have done work in human rights, transitional justice. For those who maybe are not as familiar with that field, it's a branch of the human rights field where countries that have experienced severe conflict or political violence transition from that violence towards a more democratic and peaceful society. If there's any such thing as justice in transition. So for example, if you've heard about truth commissions, commissions of inquiries, post-conflict investigations, whatever.
I immediately think of South Africa and Truth and Reconciliation, but then I also think of Rwanda.
Absolutely. Yeah, the Kinshasa process in Rwanda, the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, the South African Truth Commission. I think it really popularized the truth commissions. It wasn't the first.
It wasn't the first. No.
I think it was the 18th, or if not even a last one, if I'm recalling. Truth commissions have been around.
It's amazing because that's the first one I think of. So
yeah, because of course the history of South Africa, right? The apartheid, what happened there. Everybody really was tuned into the Truth Commission and post-apartheid reconciliation work. But the Truth Commission that I was involved with directly was the one from my native Liberia. As you know, I was saying earlier, Liberia and Sierra Leone, that region, West Africa in general, really over the last 30 years experienced some real difficult political violence, civil conflict, Ebola, all kinds of things. And so I was a part of the Liberia Truth Commission process that brought the commission's work to Liberian diaspora. So that's the background I come from. I've worked as a human rights officer. I worked here in Minneapolis for 6 years with the Advocates for Human Rights. They used to be called the Minnesota Advocates for Human Rights. In fact, it was this organization, the Advocates, that partnered with the Liberia Truth and Reconciliation Commission to bring the commission's work to the diaspora community, to the Liberian diaspora. So I've done human rights work, transitional justice work, of course, restorative justice. So in the broader international human rights and transitional justice communities, we say restorative justice, whereas I've come to learn and really humble myself to work with the idea of restorative practices locally, working with schools and things like that. But to come back to your question, who are you? I come from a Mandingo ethnic tradition in Liberia, in West Africa, as I said. But my heritage really has pieces in different other ethnic groups in Liberia. My mother was from Western Liberia, and the Vai ethnic group, although they call them the Vai Mandingo, and my dad from another part of the country.
Okay.
So I partly grew up in Western Liberia and in Monrovia itself.
Okay.
But because of the Civil War, I ended up in Sierra Leone as an unaccompanied teenager,
Wow.
as a refugee. So eventually I moved to Ghana as well as a refugee. And I was just moving because in Sierra Leone in April 1993, I think, there was a coup.
Yeah.
And that's because they started their own civil war, which kind of sprung out of the war in Liberia.
Carries over.
So as refugees in Sierra Leone, now we have to flee from our refugee here.
Depart your secondary state to go to a third.
Absolutely, and that saw me in Ghana.
Is that the case for what? Like, I was immediately thinking, you know, with the West African tradition and the cultural groups, that the tribal ties are strong, but it's never clear cut. You know, because you said, well, I technically from a Mandingo, but it's also two separate, and it never, things are never just as clear cut as outsiders would want to see them. And then even now when you're talking about the Civil War breaking out in Sierra Leone, it carries over because national boundaries are not respectful of the historical boundaries in the area.
The historical boundaries and cultural boundaries are very artificial boundaries. So these boundaries were drawn by colonial masters for their own benefits and purposes. People don't respect them as such. Their families everywhere. You know, I mean, some of my aunts were married in Sierra Leone. I have cousins from there. We went to school back and forth between Liberia and Sierra Leone. So, you know.
You don't know the difference.
Don't know the difference.
It's funny that you say that, because I literally just mentioned this to somebody, a friend, that, you know, coming from a Central American background, or some family friends, you know, I would say cousins of sorts, come from a different country. I'm from Costa Rica, but they come from Honduras. And one of the things we always discuss, and a lot of them kind of just go back and forth across the border. And the one thing that we always I heard somebody vocalize it first, because being, you know, born in the United States, I don't have that experience. It's not mine, but it's in my roots.
Right.
And I remember the saying was, well, that border was drawn by the white man,
right,
and that was all our land anyways. So who are they to tell me I can't go back and forth?
I can't tell you.
And it's the same thing I'm hearing from you.
Literally, rivers, there's a river that separates, the Mana River, that separates Liberia and Sierra Leone. In fact, they have a regional organization, sub-regional organization named after that river, the Mana River Union, between Liberia, Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Cote d'Ivoire. These are countries that are part of that Mana River organization. So that's where I come from. I traversed across West Africa as a refugee, as a youngster, just seeking safety from conflict in my country. And that was in Sierra Leone, where I finished secondary school. High school in Sierra Leone, finally. I actually started college, Restorative College, and then the war came and drove us from our campus. And then I flew to Ghana. For the first time I got in an airplane was from Freetown to Accra.
Okay.
Yeah, I was on a UN scholarship. I entered the university, Restorative College, and one semester we had to flee. Campus,
just like that. Your studies and
absolutely. So I ended up in Ghana in the refugee camp, the Bujumbura camp. From Bujumbura, eventually I came to St. Paul, Minnesota. I found myself at Hamlin University.
So you came here as a student originally?
Well, you can say, yeah, you know, there's that part of the story. I had an opportunity to come to train. I had come back from Ghana to Liberia, and so I had a relative who was working in the interim government, and they were looking for young people who could type, the telecommunications industry, and I could type actually. So they recruited me, and they said, oh, there's a training opportunity to go to the United States, and that's how I came.
Okay.
You know, while I was here, the conflict, another episode broke out. And so I just stayed and started seeking political asylum and all of that. It's a long story, you know, we could talk about that all day. But yeah, so that's how I came here. My studies were disrupted actually from 1995. I didn't go back to school again until 2000, I would say, 2000, 2001. I was always learning other things in between whatever I could, but to go back to university. It was in I came the university here referred to me as a non-traditional student because I was no longer a teenager.
Wow.
And I still wanted to go to college.
Okay.
So I never Hamlin. Yeah.
I love how we put boundaries here so much. We have clear-cut categories.
Oh, because you're sitting in class with American teenagers and you're taking these first-year classes and you have so much experience, traveling and working in refugee camp, interacting with international organizations and NGOs and humanitarian organizations, student organizations, and you have all these things going on in your head. And you're in class, and when you say something, these young kids look at you like you're some kind of genius. They think you're.
You're supposed to be teaching the class.
I was like them too. I was slender then, and I looked like a teenager, but I wasn't.
That's amazing.
Absolutely.
So I have to ask because I find this to be the sort of the theme a lot of times within immigrant communities such as ourselves. What did that education mean to you?
It meant a whole lot. Going back to college, I had a specific objective. I had experienced refugee life in Sierra Leone and Ghana. I had been assisted by international NGOs, humanitarian organizations. I felt so lucky and privileged to be alive. And I just wanted to go to school, gain skills, and get an education to help. I knew that I wanted to study conflict. I knew that I wanted to study law. I knew that I wanted to have those type of skills that I could advocate for people. And I wanted to go back in that region where there was still so much trouble.
Wow.
Yeah. So I went to Hamlin. I majored in legal studies and conflict studies minor. Because I wanted to go to law school,
So law school was the original.
It was the original goal. So I went to Hamlin because they had this program called the 3-3 program. It's a pre-professional program where you spend 3 years undergrad. Mm-hmm. Your fourth year is the first year of law school, whereby you took the LSAT, you applied to law school like everybody else. And then if you didn't pursue that path, you come back to the CLA, College of Liberal Arts undergraduate, and there you finish your degree in BA Legal Studies.
Okay.
And that's what I did, because at the point that I applied to law school, I realized I wanted to study public international law, and I got a scholarship to go to University for Peace, the UN University of Costa Rica, your country. See that Cologne.
It's a beautiful campus.
Yeah, beautiful country. I love it. So I decided, you know what, I'm not going to take all that loans, and I'm just going to take this opportunity to go get my MA International Law and see what happens, and that's what I did. Yeah. So I'm here. Minnesota is home to me now. I've been here since 1997. I've traveled all around this country. I have to say, the job I mentioned earlier with the Advocates for Human Rights, in connection with their work with the Liberia Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I went all around this country where Liberian immigrants lay and help explain the TRC's work to them. And the human rights work, I was traveling everywhere, giving talks, giving presentations, speaking to university audiences, law school audiences, graduate schools, undergrad, it was everywhere. I did that, and I have a family here. I have my wife and 3 children. I just met my wife in the refugee camp in Sierra Leone, even though we didn't.
Wow, you were
someone I met, we met her there, and then we met here again.
Intentionally or unintentionally?
Unintentionally. Her parents were here in Minnesota.
And it just happened to.
It just happened. One morning she called me around 3 a.m. She was still in Guinea. Her mother was filing for her. She's trying to come too. She said, "Oh, my mom is in St. Paul, Minnesota. I hear you are in Minnesota." And she's trying to process my immigration paperwork. She's an old lady. She needs some help.
Wow.
That's how I went to look for the
So
opening.
you came in with the right foot forward, helping
Absolutely.
with your mother-in-law first. I see.
I was single.
Good impression from the beginning.
Impression. I didn't have, she thought there had been some relationship prior. There wasn't. I just came to help her.
Yeah.
She came. I was, So now we have 3 children. The oldest is in Howard, is in the 12th grade.
Wow.
The second Koja is in the 9th grade. They all at Irondale High School here in New Brighton. And we have our son, who's also here in the Mounds View School District.
So I have to ask, and you probably get this all the time. For me, I mean, I can kind of understand some of the dynamics, but
Mhm.
I don't understand. What was the original draw, if you know, maybe you don't know, of the West African migration to Minnesota? Because it seems Minnesota's dead smack in the middle of the United States, up in the top part.
Yeah.
And being a tropical person myself as well,
Like us.
I don't think I would logically make that jump.
Right.
It was hard enough coming from Florida to Minnesota.
Naturally, you would think that, right?
Yeah.
But if you are an immigrant who's coming and who's looking for opportunities, looking for where you can raise a family and things like that, people were drawn to Minnesota for economic reason,
Okay.
for family purposes. The immigrants, the secondary migration happened a lot. People came to different other parts of the U.S. and informally, their friends and relatives in Minnesota were telling them, "Oh, this place is really great. You have jobs, you can raise a family, the schools are great." And they didn't tell them about how cold.
They forgot
to mention that
winter.
once people got here, you had to figure out how to survive. But there's a history with Liberia and Minnesota. It goes way back in the 60s.
Really?
I'm told, yeah, because of the Iron Range here.
Okay.
Liberia has one of the largest iron ore deposits in the world.
Oh.
So Liberian students came here to study at the University of Minnesota. I understand there was a college, a community or technical college that were training people in engineering, iron ore mining, and things like that.
Okay.
So people came in the 60s to study 70s and so on, and established a little Liberian community here. So during the Liberian conflict, different episodes of the conflict, when the coup happened, when one group came, when the Civil War started, another group came, and different aspects of different episodes of the Civil War, people came to Minnesota. And my understanding is, too, in addition to that I think the U.S. government, social service providers, and nonprofit organizations were very intentional about bringing immigrants to Minnesota to try to promote diversity and that sort of things. So, for example,
we're a really white state here.
Nutrient social services,
Yeah.
big in bringing refugees from West Africa to Minnesota.
Okay, that makes sense to me then.
Yeah.
That definitely makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, so here we are. This is home. There's always a debate. Liberians say that outside of West Africa, Minnesota has the largest Liberian population in the diaspora. Though in Washington, D.C. area, and certain other communities, the East Coast, like to challenge that. We think that's true.
It has to, it could very well be. I know. I'm always impressed at the West African community here.
Mm-hmm.
Not only for, and the East African community here, I give credit, but what really amazes me is the duality, the tension between integrating into the systems that are already in place,
right?
But while also maintaining these just vibrant communities with cultural practices still very relevant and very alive.
Right.
Like you don't find that in all immigrant communities that come to the United States or even just go anywhere else. And so it really it's just something that when I see the African markets and I step inside, or when I'm just walking down the street, just looking left and right, somebody with a background, from somewhere else, I just appreciate it so much more. But yeah, that is amazing. Well,
yeah, it creates that home feel to it.
Yeah, you make home where you're at.
Definitely. Yeah.
Well, we're going to take a quick break here, and we'll be back with more Just Us right after this.
Thank you.
We're back with more Just Us. If you're just joining us this week, I'm talking to Ahmed Sirleaf about him, about his work. Really, I'm starting to pick up like that international scope of justice, restorative justice, and transitional justice. And we've been kind of tuning into like your background and like that's a sliver. I want to say like it was just a thread.
Right.
You've only uncovered a thread of that history of who it is that Ahmed is and where he comes from. But it just I want to ask, so like you and I met at CMRS,
Right.
and your reputation preceded you. I'll be honest with you. They kept talking about you.
Thank you.
And your background, and I was blown away. I mean, I even I got my hand on the book that as you sort of helped put the Truth and Reconciliation. I think it's called A Tale of Two Stories, or A Tale of
The House of the House of Two Rooms.
The House of Two Rooms.
Right, yeah, the advocates for human rights, as I talked about.
And I have it at home that I've been skimming.
Right.
And so, like, even before I got to meet you, you were this grand figure. And when I met you, it was even more humbling because you are such a humble person. You walk in the room and you're just.
Well, thank you.
But tell us about like where you're at now, what you're doing now, and what does that mean? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. So I talked earlier about that Truth and Reconciliation of Liberia work that we did here with the Advocates for Human Rights for 3 years. We helped the commission write a diaspora report. Went to every community where Liberians lived in the US and in the UK and in West Africa, in Ghana actually, because we did the diaspora, consider all of the diaspora. After that, I took a job with the US government, the US Agency for International Development, as an advisor to the embassy, like the US Embassy in Liberia, in Monrovia. Working as with the development side, right? USA, it's one mission everywhere they are, the base at the embassy usually. So I worked there. My role was collaborating, learning, and adapting advisor. Basically, the idea that USA has been working for the last 60 years in these countries, trying to help with development work, and they haven't realized any development.
And there's been no development.
There's been no development. So now, the development approach that looks at, it learns and iterates as it goes along, right? So you look at what has been successful, where are the failures, how do we design this intervention? What are we thinking? Did we talk to everybody? Have we talked to the host country government properly? Have we talked to local beneficiaries? Have we talked to other development partners, the UN? Can we avoid working at cross purposes? Can we coordinate well? And so that is the function of the job I was doing, basically. I have to say, when I arrived there, people didn't know what I was doing. I was learning it too, because it was new at the agency.
Okay.
I think the Liberia mission was the second mission only.
Wow, so yeah.
It was Uganda and Liberia, it was new. Because they didn't see this like, okay, some people, if you're a budget specialist, you have discrete sort of functions, right? Every day you come, you do your spreadsheet,
I saw that. I was trying for years to get into US aid. And so I remember reading the job descriptions, and they're very limited in scope.
You do, people, you're a health specialist, you're economic growth specialist, you're democracy rights specialist, you do your stuff. And then there's this guy, so you're in program office. Your job is to look across the portfolio, help these technical teams appropriately design interventions that will help the people of Liberia and the government.
Okay.
So here's the country that I come from, and the other country that I love is sending me to work in the country that I come from.
Wow.
And so these two countries that I love and care about, I'm working for both of them.
That's been amazing.
It was amazing. It was an amazing opportunity, I have to say. I had a great time and I learned so much. So 5 years I did that. I was back and forth between Washington and Monrovia and other places, because in that kind of job they send you here, they send you there, training here, training there. and just traveling around the country, interacting with the government, the United Nations, other development organizations, and so forth. It was an excellent networking and learning opportunity as I contributed to the work there, hopefully. I did that, came back here last year, just because my family came to Liberia for 1 year and then Ebola hit, right? So they had to come back, and they didn't really, the kids wanted to come back to America. So it was difficult being away, and kids are growing up. So I said, okay, I'll come back to Minnesota and see what's my next chapter, and where does this go from here? And so February of last year I came back, and I started reintroducing myself to the community, to people, friends and former colleagues, and just networking. So I went back to CMRS, Community Mediation Restorative Services. I go way back with them. When I was in college, I interned at CMRS.
Okay.
Because as I told you, my mom was in conflict studies, so as part of my ADR, alternative dispute resolution studies, I had to do mediation, the 30-hour serial mediation training.
Yes.
And did that DRC, dispute resolution